was the first school, and God was the first teacher. And of course, nature was the lesson book, the school book, the textbook. Adam's microscopic eyes could look into the protons and the neutrons and study them. He had the telescopic ability to look into the sky and to learn the magnificence of the creation of God. And then, by investigation, he would discover knowledge. But there was something else he needed to learn, and that is he needed to learn who God was. Now remember, God made Adam a grown man, but physically a grown man, but in his mind a child. I was listening to a child development expert speak recently, and he blew my mind. And what he said, Eric, was that when you see it play a peekaboo with a child, with a baby, every time you either cover the baby's eyes or move out the baby's frame of reference, he literally thinks that you have disappeared. His mind has not developed to understand the concept that you're next door. He thinks you completely disappeared. So when he laughs, or he or she laughs, he's exhilarated by the fact that you just disappeared and reappeared. That's what's happening in his mind. That's what's going on with Adam. He knew nothing like a baby until God taught him something. And so he could see beyond belief, observe, but he had to learn. And so he spent his days studying the leaves and all nature around him. And he spent his evening walking with God. God used to come by in the cool of the evening, because by investigation he would discover knowledge, but by association he would discover God. I'm going to say it again. By investigation he discovered knowledge, but by association he would discover God. So when you send your child to a school system that has no association with God whatsoever, on top of that, in its investigation, they teach them that God does not matter because God has no role in their lives. They weren't made by God, and neither is God allowed in the school system. That's why the Bible is banned. You understand? And you are preparing a child for heaven and you send them to a public school. It's very naive. Is it any wonder that our children lose their way and so few of them stay in the fold? It has a lot to do with how we are preparing them. And so Christian education is extremely important, and you really, really need to keep the school in Hartford alive. I'm going to share something with you that I read Ellen G. White writing some time ago in 1912. She wrote The Ideal for Our Youth. Hear this. True education is the inculcation of those ideas that will impress the mind and heart with the knowledge of God the Creator and Jesus Christ the Redeemer. I'm going to read it again. True education is the inculcation of those ideas that will impress the mind and heart with the knowledge of God the Creator and Jesus Christ the Redeemer. That's what true education is. Such an education will renew the mind, transform the character. It will strengthen and fortify the mind against the deceptive whispers of the adversary of the soul. I want to take note that. The deceptive whispers of the adversary of the soul, and enable us to understand the voice of God. It will fit the learned to become co-worker with God. Now, the first point, it is the inculcation of those ideas that will impress the mind and heart with the knowledge of God, their creator. I remember we went up to Niagara Falls one year, mighty long time ago. Stephen Jr. is 38, and he was 4 at the time. That was a mighty long time ago. Took our first helicopter ride over the Niagara Falls. And if you haven't done that yet, you ought to do that. And, with the helicopter door open, and they'd go right by the falls, and the mist would blow right through. And you can just feel the power. Now the Niagara, when it's flowing, it rolls like thunder down the falls. And when you're in that helicopter, you can feel the thunder. Now, some people will never open their eyes because it just seems like the falls, the water is going to take you away as you go close. And if you don't want to take a helicopter ride, you're too scared because you got to be brave to be in a helicopter in the first place. If you're not, it's a little different. Then take a boat ride, and the same thing. They'll ride it up right up to the falls, and that mist, the water will thunder as it falls down, and that mist will come all over you, and you'll feel the power. And so we took Stephen Jr. up there and a friend and took the boat ride, and then we went to the IMAX theater after, where they were telling the history of the falls and all the brave people or crazy people who had gotten into barrels and jumped on the falls, many who had died, a few who have survived. And then they proceeded for about 3 minutes just to have the fall thunder down in the IMAX theater, and the theater is rumbling. And little Stephen got up and said, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The awe of the moment, the power of the water, the thunder of the falls caused him to think about God the Creator. Amen. That's what happens when you take advantage of Christian education. See, if they're not educated to understand who God is, that thought would never have crossed his mind. Is it any wonder that he's the director of registration for an Adventist school as he celebrates his birthday? And so we need to teach. It's so important that we put them in Christian education. The second point here she makes is that such an education will renew the mind and transform the character. Renew the mind and transform the character. So God, when he made Adam and put him in the first school, was creating an arena where Adam would grow to be like God. And after Adam got to a certain point in his existence, growing to be like God, God was going to look him in the eyes, Pastor, and say, "Adam, you are like God. You can never sin anymore. You're immortal." That was God's plan. That is also God's plan for our children. That is also God's plan for our children. And when they come into our lives, we are supposed to prepare them so that one day God can say that to them. When the Israelites went into the promised land, God gave them a directive, and I still believe it to be my directive, your directive, our directive. Deuteronomy chapter 6, start with verse 7, 8, and 9. "And thou shalt teach them diligently to your children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlet between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them on the post of your house and of your gate." Now imagine God declaring these words to his people and trying to impress upon their minds, the greatest gift you've got is your child. I'm going to say it again. The greatest gift that God has given to you is your child. And what you do with it, that this gift of God, You will have to respond to God one day and tell him what happened to his gift. You'll have to, every single one of us will have to answer to God for the way we treated our children. We trained our children. Let me tell you, I've been pastoring a long time. In fact, this is my 40th year. Don't tell nobody. I'm acting like I'm 40. And nearly all the churches I pastor, Christian education was free. Nearly all the churches I pastor, Christian education was free. Now, the pastors before said it couldn't be done, and the pastors after said we can't afford it. But when I was the pastor, it was free. When I pastored Solid Rock, 100 members. In fact, I think our budget back then was about $35,000, our offering. And little church, and we said, tell you what, I believe Christian education could be free. And they said, no, Pastor, how are we going to do that? I said, I just need each member to give me $100, and we'll buy a bus, and then we'll take all your kids to school free. So now I've been in school free. They said, really, that's all it took? I said, yeah, if you all just give me $100, we will pay, the church will pay your school fee. And not only will we pay your school fee, but in New York City, we will get a bus and we will drive them to school. And that's what we did. Now, it seemed unaffordable, but we did it. Went to Calvary. Well, there was no school to send them to at Calvary. And so I said, well, I believe we can build a school. They said, really, Pastor? We've been dreaming about it for years. I said, really? Well, since you've been dreaming about it and I know we can do it, let's build a school. So we built a school in Bridgeport. You see, came to faith, and faith was in trouble. So they said. That was the rumor. You see. And anybody, when I was at Faith, anybody who wanted to go to school would go. And of course, because folks, the issue is not, and some folks are naive to think that Christian education is expensive. Well, folks, I've lived on a pastor's salary all my life for 40 years. And it ain't much. I mean, you know, now it's a whole lot than I used to get. Because a few years ago, they actually bring us up to what we're supposed to get, is what I'm saying. But I have testimony that can witness that it is not much. But I've got 4 children who never went to public school a day in their lives. And my wife was a homemaker most of her life. We did it on a preacher's salary. Including, by the way, Pine Forge, BMA, and Oakwood. Because God is a promise keeper. God is a promise keeper. Amen. God never asks you to do something that you can't do with him. Now, you got to trust him. You've got to trust him. But God will do it. God will do it. And this is how we prepare our children for eternity. God says, you shall teach them diligently. He's talking about my word now. You see, and folks, you know, it's a sad reality that kids ain't even going to Sabbath school no more. So at least there was a time they would get 5 days of public school, telling them that, you know, it's not he and she, but they and we. And they'd get Sabbath morning, but now they don't even get Sabbath morning. You understand we got a problem if we're going to prepare the generation for the coming of the Lord? We've got a problem. Christian education is important because we're preparing children for eternity. And God says, teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you are walking by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Now, let me tell you another thing you hadn't thought about. Did you know that when the devil came along, what the devil was really saying to to Eve is that God's science is flawed? He said, "Not, did God really say, if you eat this fruit, you're going to die?" Did God really say that? God's science is messed up. What you eat is not going to kill you. God's science is flawed. Did you know that's the heart of humanism, the public school system? God's science, the idea that you were created is flawed. You evolved. It's an old lie. The amazing thing is Eve bought it. Eve bought it, and because she bought it, she suddenly became deformed. And by the way, she needed more education now in order to achieve what God had purposed. She needed education to get there in the first place. But now that she had messed up and believed the lie, she needed more education. And what do you think Eve's descendants did? Took their children and put them in the devil's school and then expect them to become Christian children. So ultimately, God decided he would fix it. How would God fix the dilemma that was created? God would become man so that man could become like God. One of my favorite statements. God would become man so that man would become like God. You see, man's real problem was that in the garden, he would study science by looking at the leaves and the sky, and he'd associate with God by walking with God every day. So God came down so he could walk with him every day. And God walked and talked with humanity so that humanity could become like God. Now, some folks have the idea that, we human beings have these dual nature. We have a secular nature. Did my 10 minutes pass already? Sister Debbie did tell me to take 10 minutes past. let me not over that. Let me wrap up here. I think about 10 minutes. I didn't look at the clock, so I could keep you all night, right? I'm talking about Christian education. But I can't give it all to you in one night. They think we have this dual nature, secular nature and a spiritual nature. So we can go to a secular school to get science and history, and go to the spiritual school or the church for a few minutes on Sabbath morning. Although that ain't working, so I guess it's probably not true. But at least we have this whole concept. But the reality is that we are one person. The spiritual being is spiritual all the time. You only have one nature. There's no such thing as your secular nature. I mean, tomorrow morning we're going out into the streets of Springfield at Shiloh to distribute tracts and literature and sign folks up for Bible lessons and stuff. And I told them tomorrow is dress down Sabbath. So just come to church dressed down because we're going to hit the streets. And so my young folks called me up. So Pastor, does that mean I can wear this? And now the particular one who are concerned, they're concerned about that because they're going to be on the pulpit singing. So they want to know. I said, look here, as a Christian, I really shouldn't have to tell you what to wear. You're a spiritual being. You belong to Jesus. It doesn't matter whether we dress up or dress down. We dress like Christians. That's it. So we've got to get out of this dichotomy of this secular and spiritual and understand you and I, we're spiritual all the time. And so we've got to put our kids in spiritual environment every single day. God says, listen to this, you shall teach them diligently to your children. Talk to them when you're sitting in your house, not when you're dressed up, in your house. When they've got their pajamas on, you've got to talk to them. Talk to them when you're walking by the way. It means, by the way, we need to spend some time with our children. Some of us are scared to do that. We want the babysitters to. When you walk with them, by the way, and by the way, he says, talk to them when you lie down. In other words, when you're going to bed at night, spend some time with the children talking about Jesus. All the time. They ought to get it all the time. Because if Adam didn't have a public school teacher to teach him no stuff, and he fell, then what about your poor son or daughter living in this messed up world today? They need a godly environment all the time. So I'm going to end where I started. Christian education is important. And many of you are more grandparents now than parents, but invest in those grandchildren. Amen. And keep this school strong, because tomorrow's generation needs it. God bless you.
Told you he could do it, and he did. Thank you so much, Doc, for getting our thoughts going around Christian education again. Thank you so very much. After the welcome was given, several individuals came in, and we just want to say welcome to all those who have come in since the welcome was given. We want to welcome Pastor Stirrup and his wife. I'm going to ask you to stand so that those who don't know you will see you. Both of you, please. All right, this is a man of faith, Pastor Stirrup. All right, thank you. Brother Brown, were you here when the welcome was given? Okay, good to see you too. Brother Brown, one of